State, please call your first witness.
State calls Nickie Daraphone, Your Honor.
And members of the jury, the witnesses have previously been sworn unless otherwise noted. State, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Nickie. How are you?
Hello.
Will you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury and spell your first and last name for the court reporter?
My name is Nickie Daraphone. It's Nickie. Last name is Daraphone. And I am a speech language pathologist with children's.
And Nickie, you said you're a speech language therapist, correct?
Yes.
Tell the jury a little bit first about your educational background.
Okay. I have a master's degree, 4-year degree, and then continued on to receive my master's. After you receive your master's degree, you continue on to do clinical work for a year until you can become fully seated with the national board.
What made you want to get into the area of speech pathology?
Well, initially, my undergraduate degree is in psychology. My first job out of school, I became a caseworker working in early childhood intervention. Through that job, I became familiar with different types of therapies and became interested in speech therapy and then pursued that career.
And do you have family in the area?
I do.
And how long you work for Children's Medical Center,
Mm-hmm.
right? How long? And you got to say when you answer out loud for the court reporter, mm-ms and mm-ms don't go over real well.
Okay.
We want to make Ms. Jackson very happy. So yes and no. Okay.
Okay.
How long have you worked for Children's?
I started working for Children's in their outpatient clinic in Richardson, October of 2015. I worked there full time during that time, and now I've transitioned to what we call a PRN status, where I just work a couple of weekends doing acute care down at Children's Medical Center in Dallas and also in Plano.
You had a client by the name of Sharon Mathews, correct?
Correct.
And what sort of services were you providing for Sharon?
Initially, when Sharon came to our clinic, she was being serviced for speech and language therapy. Later on, we also added on feeding and swallowing therapy for her.
Let's talk about speech and language therapy first. Explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what does that mean, speech and language therapy?
So when it comes to speech language pathology, there are lots of different areas that we serve our clients. For this particular age group, we work with children and pediatrics. Speech language looks at the child's ability to communicate, whether that be verbally or if they need different kinds of communication means, using sign language, using a device. So it's whatever the child needs at that time, and helping them communicate functionally their wants and needs to adults and just people in their environment.
You started working with Sharon in January of 2017, is that correct?
She came for her initial evaluation at Richardson Clinic in January. I did not have my first interaction with her until about March of 2017.
And when you met with Sharon, describe what kind of little girl she was.
She is the sweetest little girl, just very happy and always smiled. Of course, initially when she met me, she was shy, but after building a rapport, she usually would come back to the therapy room, and I just remember her smile. She's just a sweet little girl.
She seemed happy to see you,
Yes.
happy to work with you.
Yes.
You had told me a story when we met about the receptionists, how she would go and talk to the receptionists.
Yes, she was. She didn't know a stranger. I mean, she would talk to other children and other adults in the waiting room. When she came back into the clinic area, she would greet all the other people there as well.
May I approach the witness, John?
You may.
Nickie, I'm going to show you a couple of photographs I've marked as States Exhibit 1 and 2. Who is that in States 1 and 2?
That's Sharon Mathews.
And is that how you remember Sharon?
I do.
Sit over States 1 and 2 this time.
No objection, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
No objection, Your Honor.
States 1 and 2 are admitted.
Permission to publish, Your Honor.
You may.
And Nickie, let's keep it going with the speech and language issues. We talked about sort of how she would go and talk to the receptionist, talk to people around the office. So when we talk about that, it seems like she doesn't really have any language issues, but tell the jury a little bit what you were working with her on in terms of her language development.
So when we think about language, we don't always think about what the verbal output is. It could be using a gesture, smiling, things like that. So, she would smile, she would wave, she would nod her head yes or no. We would ask her questions like, "How are you doing today? Are you happy? Are you good?" I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Just and then taking that into when you started working with her on her language development, what were the skills that you were trying to help her with?
Okay, so when she was initially evaluated in January 2017, she displayed a mild to moderate expressive language disorder. What that means is that she receptively could understand what was being said to her, could follow directions, recognize common objects and things like that. Just had a little more difficulty just putting that together and verbally expressing that. At that time when she came in, she did have a handful of single words, a couple of two-word phrases that she could use. I remember the parents sharing that whenever she couldn't verbally get her met her wants needs, then she would take mom or dad by the hand and show them what that she needed.
What sort of activities did you work with, basically trying to get her to a certain goal? What sort of activities did you use with her to get her to those goals?
So the things that we focused on initially with Sharon was getting her to increase the amount of words she was using expressively, getting her to identify nouns, verbs, working on just following more like two-step directions, working on I'm sorry, I'm trying to think about some of the goals we were working on.
Let me just ask you this. With those goals, you set initial goals and there are benchmarks that you want your children, your clients, to be able to hit, correct?
Yes.
How did Sharon do in terms of hitting those benchmarks eventually?
She did great. She continually, when the clients come in, we always track how often they're meeting goals, and we document that from session to session. When she started in January with her language goals. By the time her 6-month reevaluation was due, she had achieved all of her goals, and we actually decided to discharge her from the speech and language portion, meaning that she hadn't achieved age-appropriate skills at that time.
So essentially, because you talked about in January she was evaluated, you didn't even start working with her until March, right?
That's correct.
So in a stretch of 4 months, she went from being behind to caught up, correct?
Correct.
And so that wasn't the end of your involvement with Sharon, though, correct?
No.
Tell the jury the next thing that you worked with Sharon on.
So on the initial visit, when she came in for her speech and language therapy, the mom had expressed some concerns regarding her feeding. Sharing with me that she had poor intake, that it was difficult for her to eat, and that she didn't like certain kinds of foods and textures, had difficulty chewing, and just a lot of refusal behaviors. So based on her concerns, I recommended that we go ahead and have a feeding evaluation, which was completed the next time she came into the clinic. And so from there, we thought it would be a benefit for her to add that additional service.
And did you provide that service?
I did. I saw her for feeding therapy. So the initial evaluation was March of 2017, and I saw her all the way through until October of 2017 for the feeding.
So again, describe to the jury, when we're talking about feeding therapy and some of the issues that Sharon had, what are you working on in these sessions with her?
Mm-hmm. So when Sharon came into the clinic, I asked the parents to bring in varieties of foods for her, things that she preferred and things that she did not prefer. And so what we would work on is just trying, for her really initially was just being able to be okay and accept that the food was in front of her, being able to touch the foods, being able to bring the foods to touch her mouth, to smell it, things like that. Just working on making her feel more comfortable with the foods. And then, of course, trying to get her to eat a variety of foods and drink from different types of liquids and from straws, cups, sippy cups, whatever she preferred.
At the time you started working with her, she was about 2.5, heading on to her 3rd year, correct?
Correct.
And is this, reasonably common with 2- and 3-year-olds that they exhibit these kind of difficulties with feeding? We talked about sort of just not wanting to eat certain things or different textures and things like that.
Mm-hmm. It is very common. Kids will, at different times of their lives, will have phases where they will not eat certain kinds of foods. They might kind of cycle through that for maybe they might really love chicken nuggets and french fries for 6 months, and all of a sudden they just stop eating it. But then later on they might like it again.
During the course of the several months that you worked with Sharon with feeding therapy, you watched her eat, correct?
Correct.
Did she ever choke during any of those sessions?
She didn't. When I had referenced back to my notes, I never notated that I saw her ever choking on anything. I do recall occasionally when she did not like something, she might have gagged on it a little bit initially, but never choking.
Was there anything through your expertise that you could see that was wrong with her ability to swallow, or anything with the mechanisms in her mouth or anything like that? Or more, like you said, if she didn't like a food, she would gag on it, spit it out. We'll talk about pocketing in a minute, things like that.
Mm-hmm. So as part of our evaluation, we do take a closer look at the child's oral structures, looking at their teeth, their tongue, their mouth, and how they're able to maneuver that for food and drinking, for chewing, biting, for swallowing. Overall, she demonstrated functional and age-appropriate skills. In regards to her chewing, with some foods, she was able to chew great, and with other foods, preferably ones that were not preferred, she didn't always chew those appropriately.
And what does that show you, the fact that some foods she can chew well and others that she doesn't like, she doesn't chew as well? Does that indicate there's a problem with chewing, or she just doesn't like some of those foods?
Most oftentimes just indicates that she just has a strong preference.
When we talked, you mentioned that Sharon would pocket food sometimes. What is pocketing food?
Pocketing occurs when children will, when they're eating, when they'll keep food either inside along their mouth, behind their, right here behind their lip, or inside of their cheek. And there's different reasons for why they do that. Some children do that because if they get something in their mouth and they're not familiar or don't like the texture of the food, they're not really sure how to react to that. Instead of like spitting out, they might just hold it. Some children on the other side of that might really like the way that feels, and it might be soothing, so they'll hold it. So there's just a number of reasons that we can't pinpoint as to why they do that.
Have you seen some children in a matter of it being something, it's one of the few things that children can control, right?
Correct.
Their ability to, whether they want to swallow food and eat food, that's up to them, correct?
Correct.
Have you seen that before?
Yes.
Children will pocket food because they just don't want to eat it, or something else is going on and they're taking control of the situation.
Correct.
And again, with Sharon, though, there wasn't anything mechanically wrong with her ability to swallow or anything like that, correct?
No, I didn't see any kind of overt signs or symptoms, and that she could do it on a number of different textures and foods.
And you never saw her choking? You saw gagging a couple times, never choking where you had to do anything, or any emergency procedures or anything that caused you any concerns in all those months that you worked with her, correct?
No, I don't recall her ever choking during a session with me.
Did you work with her on solids and liquids?
I did.
And nothing on either one, correct?
No.
Did you ever interact with the defendant in this case?
I did.
First of all, for record purposes, do you see the defendant, Wesley Mathews, here in the courtroom?
I do.
Can you describe what he's wearing?
He's got a gray suit on.
Let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant over the court, Your Honor.
The record will so reflect.
And Nickie, the amount of sessions that you provided between the language therapy and the feeding therapy was pretty extensive, correct?
Yes.
And was it sometimes the defendant would be there, sometimes his wife would be there, kind of a mix?
Yes.
And the interactions that you had with the defendant, anything out of the ordinary that you noticed?
No.
Did you ever have a conversation with the defendant about force feeding Sharon?
I have standard precautions that we share with our parents is that, we don't want to ever force feed. And we try to teach strategies so that they can read the child's reactions and to how they're eating, and try to work on watching for their cues and backing off when needed to.
And you expressed that specifically to the defendant, correct?
Yes.
Did he seem to understand that?
Yes.
Would you ever, through your training and experience, your education, ever recommend force feeding milk at 3 o'clock in the morning to a 3-year-old?
No, that's something I would not recommend.
Did the defendant sometimes even record some of the sessions where he was there?
I do recall him bringing out his phone and recording our session.
So from your vantage point, he seemed to have a pretty good indication of what was going on and how to properly conduct himself with Sharon in terms of what was appropriate with helping her eat or drink and what was not appropriate, correct?
I would say so, yes.
With the feeding therapy, you never got the opportunity for Sharon to reach all of her goals and discharge, is that correct?
That's correct.
During the course of your therapy with Sharon, do you believe that she was progressing in her ability to eat and drink different types of food?
I do. I do feel like from the initial time that I evaluated her, that we were able to add new things for her to try. And it was also reported by both parents that there were things that she was more willing to accept at home as well.
And for the language therapy, she was discharged successfully, never had to come back for anything along those lines, correct?
Correct.
I'll pass the witness, John.
Defense.
May it please the court. Ms. Daraphone, would it be fair to say that during the few months that you had with Sharon, that there were times that she was a challenge to try to get to comply with what you were showing her?
Yes.
And we're not saying in a bad way, but in a way because that's why she was there. Would that be fair?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that during this time period, y'all had certain milestones or goals that y'all were trying to accomplish with little Sharon. Wouldn't that be fair?
Yes, we did have goals for her feeding.
Right, and that way you can gauge how she's coming along and how she's doing, correct?
Correct.
And one of the milestones y'all had was making sure that she was progressing, making sure she was making certain weight gains over a period of time. Wouldn't that be fair?
That is something that I was not monitoring.
So that was something that would not be important to you.
It is important, but specifically, that's something that I did not specifically address with the parent from time to time as far as like how much weight she had gained from session to session.
Would that be something that you would monitor and weigh her when she comes in?
That's typically not something that we would do. That's something that we would typically have like a nutritionist follow. A lot of times we would just ask for a parent report.
Right, and one of those reports that would be something that would echo the hard work that you were doing with her is seeing that she was having a steady weight gain, because that would show that this therapy was working and that she's eating. Because at the end of the day, that's what any parent wants, is for their child to be able to eat and grow. Wouldn't that be fair?
Yes.
And when you would see her would be, was it once a month or once a week?
Initially, she was coming more frequently, and then at the end, she was only coming in about once a month, either once every other week or once a month. I'd have to look at my notes, but I do recall that there was some concerns with the insurance and how many visits we were allowed to have.
Right, and that's almost all of us experiences, funds and joys of insurance. Wouldn't that be fair?
Yes.
And wouldn't it also be fair that during the times that you would see her, you would be able to notice if she wasn't making any progress, if she came in thinner, lighter, or something? That's got to be one of the cues that you use to look at to see if things are working. Isn't that correct?
I think it's hard for me to physically look at a child to say if she's, thinner or have gained more weight. If I don't see them, unless it was like a significant amount of weight loss or weight gain.
Right, if it's something that's really noticeable, you're just going to move along, assuming everything is working.
Correct.
And you would have your ups and downs, like I think there's a video of you trying to get baby Sharon to, I think, start off with licking the spoon, then you reach over and you grab another spoon, and you're trying to lick it 10 times to show her how to do it just for texture and taste. So you had to put in a lot of effort and a lot of patience in dealing with her, didn't you?
Correct.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Steve?
Well, and Nickie, that's part of parenting, right? Effort and patience.
I would say so, yes.
I'll pass the witness.
Defense?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Steve?
State calls Amber Neville.
Okay, any objections for this witness to be finally excused?
No, Your Honor.
Subject to recall, Your Honor, if we need to reach her, that's all, but she's free to go back.
Okay, State, you have her contact information?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. You may step down. State, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Amber. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Will you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury? Spell your first and last name for our court reporter, please.
Yes, my name is Amber Neville, spelled A-M-B-E-R, last name N-E-V-I-L-L.
And Amber, how are you employed?
I am a physical therapist at Children's Health.
Let's go back before we talk about your time at Children's. How do you get to the point where you're able to be a physical therapist? What sort of education and training did you receive?
So for our degree, it's a clinical doctorate, so we go to an undergrad program, so you can have any major in undergrad, and then you apply for grad school with certain prerequisites, and we go to a graduate program that varies, but it's typically a little less than 3 years, and then we take an exam, and that's how we become licensed.
And Amber, why'd you choose to go into physical therapy?
I've always loved working with kids. My mom worked with kids with special needs and had the opportunity to volunteer with her growing up, and I always liked that. And it's a way to get to know kids on a long-term basis and see them make progress, and it's a very rewarding job.
So tell the jury a little bit how you became a physical therapist with children's.
When I was a student, I had a clinical rotation at Children's Medical Center then in Dallas in outpatient, and I really enjoyed that rotation. I always knew I wanted to do pediatrics. When I graduated from grad school after that rotation as a student, there were no openings at Children's. I ended up working at Cook Children's in Fort Worth for a year, and then was presented the opportunity to work at Dallas. There was an outpatient position open, so I took that job after a year.
And you now work in Richardson for Children's, right?
Not currently. I am now a team leader, so I don't treat as much, but I'm supervising a team, and I work at the Plano location now.
I should have said back in
Yes.
2017.
Yes, I worked at Richardson then, yep.
And Nickie worked there as well, Nickie Daraphone, correct?
Yes.
And Lyndsey Walker, who the jury will hear from next, she worked there as well.
Yes.
And I guess, I didn't bring this up with Nickie, but describe to the jury sort of the outpatient facility in Richardson. People kind of know, big children's hospital down here off of Stebbins.
Yep.
What kind of facility are we talking about in Richardson?
So the Richardson Clinic opened in the very beginning of 2016. It was a brand new clinic. We were all new staff to that clinic when it opened, Nickie and Lyndsey and I. It's a very nice facility. It's one of the newest locations. It was all constructed for children's inside. It's a small clinic, so there's only 2 of each kind of discipline. So we work closely together. A lot of the kids that we treat there see all the disciplines. So it's a very small, has a more of a family type feel compared to the bigger children's hospital, in my opinion.
When you're working with children who are your clients in the area of physical therapy, what sort of areas are you working with various children?
So we see a range of kids, depending on the diagnosis. We see everything from an acute, like an orthopedic injury, to developmental delays, to, acute style illnesses that they're recovering from. Physical therapists we work on gross motor skills, so all development, crawling, walking, standing, jumping, balance, that kind of thing, and then strengthening, range of motion, those kinds of things.
Did you have the opportunity to work with a little girl named Sharon Mathews?
I did.
Tell the jury a little bit about Sharon.
Sharon came to us, and when we all first met her, we said, "Oh, she looks like a little baby doll," because she was very tiny and petite. And all the kids we work with are cute, but she was extra cute, and we were like lucky to have her. She was walking by the time she came to see me for the first physical therapy appointment. So when we do that first treatment session, we just kind of get to know them. There's a lot of play involved in what we do. All of the strengthening and those kinds of things are all geared around activities that the kids like. So she was, yeah.
You started working with Sharon in August of 2016, is that correct?
Yes.
She had just turned 2 at that point?
Right.
What skills were you working on with Sharon?
So when she came to us, she was walking. She still had, her walk still looked like that of a toddler, and she hadn't been walking that long. So we were working on her, what we'd call her gait pattern. So the way that she was walking, making it look better. I worked with her on getting her some shoe inserts to support her feet. We worked on balance. We worked on stairs. We worked on, she was a little bit shy at first. We noticed maybe some movement insecurities, so we worked on stepping up on a mat, or what you would encounter if you were walking in the community, just obstacles and that sort of thing.
Was she happy to work with you?
Yeah, I think it took her a minute to warm up, but she definitely, once you found something that she liked, she would be engaged and work with us.
What kind of activities did you work with her in terms of the things that she liked during the course of physical therapy?
Yeah, so we do a lot of the same kinds of things with kiddos, but we do a lot of puzzles, a lot of stickers. I remember in particular, in thinking about this, that there was this baby doll that we had all the little stuff that goes with the baby doll, like let's wash the baby. You know, every time you walk across the balance beam, you can bring the baby a bottle or you can bring the baby a blanket. We do those kinds of things. We use the toys to do more repetitions without them feeling like they're doing a task.
You started working with her in August of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned she was 2, and you said she was walking along the lines of a toddler, so we're talking
Mm-hmm.
14, 15, 16 month area. But
I would say not a toddler, but like a new walker,
Okay.
which would be a toddler, an 18-month-old maybe. Yeah, just a late walker. Like the gait's not totally stable, but she can walk, but you'd still want to be around,
was
probably.
there anything structurally wrong with her that you saw, or she just needed a little help?
Nope, the only thing that I had mentioned the shoe inserts was just that her feet were a little flat, but that is not terribly uncommon, especially in a new walker.
And you worked with her until about the end of 2016, towards the end of December 2016.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So around 4 months you worked with her.
Mm-hmm.
Tell the jury about her progress during those 4 months.
Yeah, so she made great progress. Like I said, so we went from just kind of her working on what her walking looked like to then working on, can she walk across a balance beam? Can she go up and down the stairs? We did a lot of strengthening and preparation to get her to learn how to jump. She was not jumping by the time I finished with her, but she definitely had made progress. Kind of as I read back through my notes, like, stepping up onto, she could then step up onto a mat without falling, or she could take a step over something without, tripping or losing her balance. So really good progress, I would say.
And was Sharon, you work with all different kinds of children, right? Was Sharon one of the type of children where she was just brittle? She would take a step and her bones would break or anything like that?
No,
Did she ever have any significant falls under your care?
no,
If she did, would you have noted that in the medical records?
yes.
Is that something very important in documentation?
Yes, we have a very extensive documentation system for falls, especially not only even falls, but what we would call like a near miss. So any event that, they might have tripped or something or fell, but they didn't get hurt, we would still even document something like that. So
Going back and looking at your records, did you see any of those near misses or anything significant that you saw in the records to share?
nope, the only thing that I noticed that I documented was that when she would lose her balance, but all of those skills are also documented with, we're always holding her hand or guarding her in some way.
What kind of precautions do y'all take to prevent falls? Because you're working with children that need help.
Yeah.
You got to push them a little, but you also
Of course.
don't want them to get hurt. So what do you do?
Yeah, so we have, in therapy world, we have different forms of guarding, all the way from dependent, so they can't do it at all. We basically do it for them, to independent. With Sharon, it looked like, through most of my notes, trying to remember that a lot of hers was one handheld assist, so that's just me holding one hand, or be holding 2 hands. And we have something we call contact guard assist, where it's like you're kind of, you have your hand on their trunk, or you're just, right, kind of a light touch on them. So they're doing it, but you're just, in case they lose their balance, you're right there.
In terms of the appointments themselves, did Sharon's parents, the defendant, as well as his wife, did they miss a significant amount of scheduled appointments with y'all?
Yes. For example, I saw her for the first visit in mid-August, and then we didn't see her again until almost mid-October. So I would say every several weeks or so, every couple of weeks, there was a cancellation or a no-show.
When you cancel appointments, when you're trying to work physical therapy, how does that impact your ability, or the child's ability to progress?
Oh, it definitely impacts. Each week we do the same skills, and then we build on those skills with the expectation that the family has worked with them at home. So we definitely do those things. That helps with progress. It's going to be the family compliance, but also the attendance to the sessions.
Did you ever have much interaction with Wesley Mathews?
Not extensively. I recall him being at one session, but we didn't have extensive conversation or anything.
By the time you passed Sharon on to Lyndsey, was her next therapist, correct?
Right.
Despite missed appointments and delays that she had, would you say that she was progressing to the point where you wanted to see her get?
Yeah, I think she did well. I took the different position in Plano, so that's kind of why we moved on. We would have kept seeing her though. I would not have stopped seeing her at that point.
I'll pass the witness.
Defense.
May it please the court. Just about how many appointments in the 3 to 4 months that you were seeing Sharon did you have with Sharon?
I treated her 7 times.
Treated her 7 times
Mhm.
out of 3 months or so.
Yes, sir.
And would it also be fair to say that you gave the parents or Sharon homework that they had to do in the times between their appointments? Is that correct?
Yes.
And you would see that those had been implemented because obviously she was moving along, so you could tell that they were spending time with Sharon. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
See,
Nothing further, Your Honor.
any objections to releasing this witness?
None from the state.
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. You may step in.
She is finally excused, Your Honor.
Yes.
State calls Lyndsey Walker. Just go ahead and speak. Just speak at the mic.
Okay.
State, you may proceed.
Good afternoon, Lyndsey. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Will you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury? Spell your first and last name for our court reporter, please.
I am Lyndsey Walker, Lindsey, Walker, Walker.
Lyndsey, how are you employed?
I am employed by Children's Medical Center, a physical therapist there.
What do you have to do to become a physical therapist?
You go to 4 years of regular undergrad, and then you get your graduate degree for physical therapy.
Where'd you get undergrad?
I went to the University of Texas in Austin.
In Austin?
Uh-huh.
And where'd you get your master's at?
At Texas State University in San Marcos.
And how did you work your way back up here to Dallas, or actually in the Richardson area, to work for Children's?
My family's from the area, and my husband before he was my husband, was living here, and so came back to the area. Also, always wanted to work for the hospital, so.
How long have you been working for Children's at Richardson?
In Richardson, I worked for Children's. This year will be 10 years. I started at Richardson when it opened. It's been, I can't recall the exact date that it opened.
Three and a half years.
About 3 years, yeah.
And before that, you worked at Children's also as a physical therapist for children?
Yes, I worked at a different outpatient center in Mesquite.
And you have a lot of different patients, clients that you work with, correct?
Yes, sir.
Was one of them a little girl named Sharon Mathews?
Yes, sir.
Did you start working with Sharon right at the beginning of 2017?
Yes.
And did you work with her until around June of 2017?
Yes.
Now, jury heard from Amber Neville before.
Mhm.
She was Sharon's initial physical therapist, is that correct?
Yes.
And you took over after that.
Yes.
So when you come in to a situation like that where a child has been seen by another therapist and so goals are laid out,
Right.
how does that work? You're sort of in the middle of therapy.
Right. So there's always, documentation for what treatments are carried out and goals that are set, so then another therapist at any point can come in and take over the care. And then also in my situation, when I came in, we do regular interval reevaluation. So my first appointment with her was a reevaluation where I kind of evaluated the goals that were already set. She had met some of those, and then I planned new goals for her since she had made some progress.
So at this point, Sharon was about 2.5 years old,
Yes.
and you said that she had met some goals and you made new goals for her. Tell the jury about these new goals starting in 2017.
So at the reevaluation, the new goals were jumping, running. I believe there was a goal for climbing what we call pediatric stairs previously, so that's like a shorter stair. And we carried on with a goal for more of a standard height stair, so the typical stairs that you would see out in the environment. So those were the main things that we were working on: running, climbing stairs, jumping.
When you started working with Sharon, describe her personality to the jury.
At first she was shy, but she was sweet. She was very cooperative. She enjoyed anything that I put in front of her. In pediatric care, in pediatric therapy, a lot of our treatments look like playtime. That's the way that they're kind of designed to get them motivated, and she liked any toy or activity that we gave her. So a joy to work with.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Just
describe that. You said a lot of it's like playtime. You're trying to get them, like in this case, you're trying to get Sharon to jump and run and climb stairs.
Yes.
How do you incorporate playtime with that?
So I specifically remember she liked this animal puzzle that we did. So, if I wanted her to do the stairs, she would, I would be assisting her up the stairs. She would grab a puzzle piece at the top. She would come down. She would put the puzzle piece in the puzzle, and it would make a sound, and that was fun and silly, and she would like that. Or a doll house, going and finding the princesses across the balance beam, or that sort of thing.
Did she enjoy coming and working with you?
Yeah, at first she was shy, but she warmed up quickly. She always entered the gym easily and was excited to pick a toy, and I believe she did.
Did you ever see Sharon fall down at all?
No, sir.
You would have made note of that, correct?
Correct.
And we went over with the jury sort of the precautions that Amber uses. Those are, for all physical therapists and children's, it's the same precautions, correct?
Correct.
And so if there's any fall, you're going to note it, right?
Yes.
Any close calls, you're going to note it,
Mhm.
correct? And you got to answer yes or no.
Oh, yes.
And none of those were Sharon. Right?
Exactly. Yes.
Sharon, the kind of little girl where she'd take a step and her legs would just snap in half or anything like that?
No.
No, she didn't break any bones under your care, correct?
Correct.
Didn't even have any close calls?
No.
All right. Did you ever have any interaction with the defendant, Wesley Mathews?
He was present at one session.
Anything significant with that?
No. I recall him waiting in the waiting room. We reviewed the session, and that was kind of that.
In terms of Sharon's, it's not really Sharon, it's the defendant and his wife in terms of bringing her to the appointments. Did they have more missed appointments than what you would like to see?
Yes.
Tell the jury about that.
So we, when we evaluate a child, we recommend a frequency or a plan of care. So initially for Sharon, that was once a week. Once she started making progress, we were able to drop it off to once a month, and that was in May that we did that. But between when I first started seeing her in January until May, it was recommended that she should come once a week, and I believe I need to look at my notes, but I believe it was 8. She came 8 times during that time frame.
8 times during essentially 5.5 months.
Exactly. Yes.
And so you mentioned in May, Sharon dropped down to once a month. Tell the jury why she was able to drop down to once a month.
So at that point, she was showing that she was able to make progress the way that we expected. She was jumping. She was climbing the stairs on her own. She was not caught up to her age level, but she was showing that she was capable of doing those things with just a little bit of practice and exposure. So at that point, the only goal that she had not met was running, and she was showing that she was well on her way to starting to run. She was doing kind of the fast walk that you see before kids begin running. And so at that point, I felt like it was appropriate to just, give a home program to the family, expose her to these things, and I believe that she's capable of getting to where she needs to be.
And that would be of a normal, basically 3-year-old at that point.
Yes.
And so 8 sessions over the course of 5 months, she was able to hit all your goals,
Yes.
almost hit running, but hit all your goals, progress to the point where she was discharged from your care, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Fair to say she caught up pretty quickly.
She did.
I'm sure you see a lot of children, it takes a lot longer, a lot more sessions to get to the progress we're sharing. Is that fair?
It is.
I'll pass the witness.
Defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Walker, let's be fair here. Surely the Mathews weren't the only parents that ever missed appointments. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And every week for working parents is a lot, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
And wouldn't it also be fair to say that you complimented them on the work that they were doing outside of these therapy sessions and what they were doing at home? Isn't that correct?
Can you restate that?
Isn't it correct that you complimented them, either Mr. Mathews or Cindy Mathews, on the amount of work that they were doing between sessions with Cindy? Because she would come in and she was improving, which showed you that they were also working with her at home. Isn't that correct?
It's correct that that she was making progress. Yes.
Isn't it also correct you had discussions with them about the real necessity of continuing with physical therapy?
I don't think I'm understanding the question.
Isn't it also true that you had conversations with either Cindy or with Mr. Mathews about continuing with physical therapy, that it was only really recommended if they felt that she was falling behind?
Yes, that's correct.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Safe.
And that was in June when you discharged her, correct?
In June, I provided Mom with a handout that just showed what, a typical progression, so they could keep their eye out. If at any point she fell behind, then they could feel free to reach out to us. But at that point, she had been making progress and met all her goals. So that was more just for the future, yes.
Because Sharon met her goals.
Yes, Sharon did meet her goals.
I'll pass the witness.
Defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. But isn't it also true that you all have certain policies in place that if they miss a certain number of appointments, you end up kicking them out of the program? Isn't that true?
Yes.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
State.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right. Any objections to the witness being finally excused?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you very much. You may step down. Attorneys, please approach.
Oh, I'm not done.
Lisa, this will be on the record.
I'm ready, Judge.
Members of the jury, I am going to instruct you on this next, and actually your first break. You will need to contact one of your family members, and you will need to ask them to bring belongings for you. You will have them bring your belongings to the 5th floor, the 282nd. One of my bailiffs will collect the belongings for you. You'll need to tell them what juror number you are. When they bring the belongings, they'll reference your juror number. You all will remain together this evening. Okay? So on the break, you will need to call a family member. I'll say it one more time, to bring you belongings. Okay? You may need to ask them to pack maybe 3 or 4 days worth of belongings for you. Okay? They're to bring them to the courthouse at their earliest convenience. We'll be waiting on them. Okay? So if we can get This first officer here, RTZ, if you can take them to the back for me.
All rise.